Picture this. You're hiking through the woods, everything's silent, no birdsong at all, and then a deer steps into the clearing ahead of you and just stares. Not runs, stares. And for a split second you catch yourself wondering, what's actually happening inside that animal's head right now? We ask that question constantly, but almost always backwards. We film animals, tag them, track them with drones, write entire textbooks about their behavior. What we rarely ask is the one question that actually matters to us personally. What do they think about us? Not in some poetic campfire story way. I mean literally, neurologically, behaviorally. And the science on this is honestly a lot weirder and a lot more humbling than most people expect. Because here's the part nobody tells you before your first trip to the zoo or your first whale watching tour. You are not the only one having an experience. Something on the other side of that glass or that water is also processing you, filing you away, forming an opinion. Let's go find out what that opinion is, species by species. Let's start with crows, because if you've ever wronged one, I have bad news for you. Researchers at the University of Washington ran a now famous experiment. They wore specific masks while trapping wild crows on campus. Weeks later, anyone wearing that same mask, even just walking by, doing nothing threatening, got mobbed and scolded on sight. The crows remembered the face. But here's the unsettling part. The crows taught the mask to their chicks and to other crows in the flock, birds that had never personally been trapped, who had never even seen the mask before that moment. The danger was passed down socially, like gossip, which means a crow you've literally never met could already have an opinion about you because its parents warned it. You have a reputation in the crow community, and you never even got to make a first impression, and it runs the other way too. Crows that were fed and treated gently remember that just as clearly, landing closer, relaxing around specific people they trust. Crows aren't just reacting to humans, they're keeping files on us. Then there's the animal we think we already understand completely, the dog. Brain scan studies on awake, trained dogs found something remarkable. When a dog smells its own owner, its brain's reward center lights up harder than it does for food, for toys, for anything else. You are, quite literally, your dog's favorite thing on earth, ahead of dinner. And it's not just smell. Research out of the University of Lincoln and the University of São Paulo shows dogs can tell an angry human face from a happy one, even a total stranger's face, by cross-referencing expression with tone of voice. Some researchers think this is basically the whole reason dogs exist as we know them. Over 15,000 years, the dogs that were best at reading us were the ones that got fed, protected, and allowed to stick around. We accidentally bred an entire species to specialize in understanding our emotions. It goes deeper too. A stressed owner's cortisol levels are mirrored in their dog's bloodstream. And in fairness experiments, a dog that watches another dog get rewarded for a trick, then gets nothing for doing the same trick, will simply stop cooperating. It knows when it's being treated unfairly. Elephants take this even further. From personal files to entire cultural archives, in Kenya's Amboseli region, elephants were shown to react with far more fear to the scent and clothing of Maasai men, who have a history of conflict with elephants, than to Kamba men who don't. Even among elephants who'd never personally had a bad encounter with anyone, that fear was passed down through the herd as shared cultural knowledge. They're not just judging individuals, they're profiling groups based on collective history, and elephants grieve. They've been documented returning months or years later to the exact spot where a human they cared about died, standing there quietly, touching the ground. Elephants abused by humans, former circus or logging animals, show trauma symptoms that persist for years, even in safe sanctuaries. But elephants treated with real consistency form bonds that look a lot like loyalty, traveling long distances to greet a specific keeper, refusing to eat when that person is sick, and only eating again once they return. Dolphins might be the strangest case of all, because there's real evidence they're studying us back. Wild dolphins have been seen mimicking the exact movements of human divers, examining our equipment, and in lab settings, figuring out and exploiting the rules of an experiment faster than the researchers could redesign it. Dolphins also assign unique signature whistles to specific humans, essentially giving people names, and they'll recall those whistles years later. And because dolphin society constantly shifts, with alliances forming and breaking, they need to track who's reliable and who isn't. Studies show they extend that exact same tracking to humans, engaging more openly with people who've been consistent and trustworthy over time. Smaller birds are paying attention too. European robins get noticeably calmer around specific humans who've approached them gently before. They're not just distinguishing human from non-human, they're distinguishing you from someone else. Magpies have been shown to target aggression specifically at people who previously disturbed their nests, while ignoring total strangers standing right next to them. Even pigeons, the birds we've spent decades mocking, can recognize individual human faces in photographs and remember them long term. And African gray parrots don't just mimic sound. They use specific words in the right context, in a way that looks a lot like genuine understanding. Now here's where it gets heavier. Scientists have a term for the invisible mental map animals keep of danger and safety in their environment. It's called the landscape of fear. And a 2019 study in Ecology Letters played recordings of lions, leopards, hunting dogs, and human voices to wildlife across several continents. The result, animals were consistently more afraid of a human voice than of an actual apex predator. Not slightly more, dramatically more, and they're not wrong to feel that way. We've reshaped this planet more than almost anything since the last mass extinction. But that's not the whole story. Off the coast of Western Australia, at Monkey Maya, wild dolphins have voluntarily approached and interacted with specific humans for over 40 years. No training involved, sometimes even bringing fish to people they know, not to eat, just to share. In East Africa, wild honey-guide birds actively lead human honey hunters to beehives, a genuine two-way partnership that requires the bird to recognize which specific humans are actually worth guiding. And researchers who've spent decades alongside wild chimpanzees describe something that, stripped of scientific caution, looks a lot like individual animals choosing their company. So what do animals actually think of us? There isn't one answer. There's a spectrum. On one end, a fear so deep, it now outweighs millions of years of predator instinct. On the other, something that looks remarkably like curiosity, trust, even friendship, extended toward a species that hasn't always deserved it. What ties it all together is attention. Animals aren't looking at a species. They're looking at you, specifically, tracking what you do, deciding if you can be trusted, sometimes passing that judgment on to others who've never even met you. You have a reputation out there, whether you know it or not. So maybe the real question isn't what animals think about us. We've got a decent answer to that now. The real question is, what would they think of us if we finally started paying attention back?